Okay, welcome back. Thank you for
Thanks,
having this
Lisa.
conversation. I gave you the questions for this one a while ago. I'm assuming you thought about
I
them.
did.
Is the papers there related?
No,
Okay.
I just got.
Okay. Today we're going to discuss about mentorship and both finding a mentor and being a mentee to an extent. But I
Yeah,
think most of the questions just oriented around what are your thoughts on like finding role models and finding mentors, which
yeah,
hopefully will help people who are listening to find one for themselves. So we'll just go into question one. Why should you have a role model?
yeah. Well,
I guess we could even explore like, well, what is a role model? Do you
yeah,
want to
and that
talk
was
about
sure,
that
yeah,
first?
and that was kind of the first thing that I spent some time thinking about is what is a role model, and for me, like I kind of go to who are the role models in my life,
Hmm.
and kind of like when we were talking about it a little bit, yes, or a couple days ago when we were discussing. You first asked me about did I have role models and mentors and anybody that came to mind, and there's a few people that came to mind because it's in different areas of my life that I feel like I kind of had different role models, like family versus my job versus certain like other hobbies or things like that. Like I kind of have different people in different areas.
Did you ever have someone who you looked up to because they had a very good holistic?
Yeah,
Okay, so you also
I
had
do.
one that was a
Yes.
good
Yeah.
balanced. Okay.
Yeah. So I guess for me, like when I think about what a role model is, and I think about those role models in my life, like what was it? Because some of them I sort of sought out, but a lot of them just sort of developed into role models for me. And so like when I think about what is it that makes those people a role model for me, I think in a big part of it is somebody to look up to and somebody to try and emulate and kind of maybe someone who's in a place that I want to be, but in a lot of ways, it's also somebody that I guess maybe like challenged me and maybe helped me sort of break out of, whatever bubble I was living in and kind of made me think about things a little differently and who asked good questions
Hmm.
and sort of broadened my way of thinking a little bit. And whether some of those were probably more intentional than others, I don't know, but when I think about the people that really probably had the biggest impact on me in terms of role models and people that I look up to, a lot of them really challenged me.
And so they were challenging you to grow beyond what you already
Yeah,
were.
yeah,
Okay. And to really break it down into simple terms, when you say you look up to them, what does that effectively mean? Particularly, does that mean that they are somewhere where you would like to be, and then you look up to them like, hey, one day I would like to be like that person?
yeah.
Okay.
So some of them, there's a few. I mean, like, I'll talk about like my parents are probably my biggest role model, and I'm
Hmm.
sure lots of people would say that, but for me, it is certainly the case. So I mean, they're absolutely two people that I look to in terms of like a pretty holistic one, in terms of like my dad, in terms of like career and how you parent while also having a career, and like my mom was stay at home. So like they're tremendous role models for me. But also some of them other role models in my career were some were where I wanted to go, and some of the biggest role models I have a cousin who I look up to tremendously as a parent, and we're not that far apart in age, and we both have three kids, and she's a little ahead of where I am, but we're always talking, and she's a huge role model for me in terms of parenting because, you know, she does a lot of reading and a lot of workshops and a lot of
Hmm.
trying to like become a better parent. And then we talk about that, and that challenges me to be better and ask good questions, and we
Hmm.
talk about strategies. I don't know, it's just so some are further ahead than others, but they all, I don't know, kind of offer something different.
So then to summarize the response, why should you have a role model? In your experience, it was you had role models because they helped guide you to a better version of yourself,
Definitely. Yeah,
improving you.
absolutely. Yeah, helping you figure out where you want to get and what do you kind of need to do to get there. And whether they were that model, maybe they're kind of that where you want to end up, you want
Hmm.
to try and be more like them, or maybe they're just helping you figure out along the way who you want to be to get there.
Hmm.
Maybe they're not the person you're trying to be because they're not that much further ahead than you, but they're asking
Hmm.
good questions and they're making you think and they're helping you figure out who
Hmm.
you want to be. So,
Yeah, and I guess that would be a different concept in the it's not coming to my mind, but like a peer to peer
It
relationship
is
where
exactly more than maybe a role model.
yeah, okay, and that could be
But
a
in terms of
discussion for
mentorship,
another
because
day.
you're
Yeah.
talking about mentorship
Hmm.
too, and so like a mentor, I don't think has to be some 60-year-old gray-haired person
Yeah.
who is like lived their life and is now sharing their wisdom with you. It can also a mentor can also be somebody who's making you think,
Yeah, like a
challenging
couple
you,
years removed from
and
the thing that you want to
that's
do.
it
Okay.
exactly.
Okay.
So
Nice. We'll move on to the next question. So, what attributes should you look for in a role model?
so I guess in terms of a role model for me, it is somebody who kind of exhibits those values, and we kind of talked about those values and principles that
So
you
what were the
aspire to.
attributes you were looking for?
I
So let's say if we go to a specific area, your role models in your career, like what
Yeah.
were they doing that made you think of them as a role model? Like, oh, I should be like this
Yeah.
person.
Okay, I had one role model in one of my first jobs working for the government. He was kind of a project manager at the time, then became a director and exec director and kind of moved his way up. But he had a calmness about him and a presence. Like when you met with him, and he was pretty high up and especially towards the end of his career, like he was really quite high up in the government. But when you met with him, he was totally with you. And his presence of mind, he was always really well spoken. He had a great family, like really strong family values, had a huge focus on his family, worked really hard to build a team environment, and was just such a leader, like just such a natural leader that you just couldn't help but like look up to him and think, well, at least for me, if I could be that kind of a leader in whatever role it is, right? I don't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily know that I'll be working for the government still in 20 years, but if wherever I'm at, if you can bring people together like that and just exude that kind of calmness and confidence and just the kind of person that people like to be around, I thought, man,
So,
that's what I want to do. That's
so
what I want
for
to be.
work, it was calm, confident, and present.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so because looking up to them as a manager, it didn't, you always felt comfortable coming up to them,
Yeah.
asking, and, eventually I guess I saw myself maybe in a manager role one day and I thought, that's what I want for my employees. I want to feel like they're being supported and like, he gave I still remember this. He kind of talked about oftentimes you see, especially in government, it's set up like a hierarchy, right? You got all the like minions down here, and then you got your like manager, and that's literally how it's built. And then it works all the way up to in the provincial government. There's your premier, and that's it, right?
Mhm.
But like he envisioned it like the flip of that,
Yeah.
where you've got all the people working up at the top, and then everybody as you move up the like management, you're really moving down this upside down pyramid and they're all supporting you, and like so I'm being supported by my manager, who's being supported by their directors, who are being supported by their exec directors, who are
Mm-hmm.
being supported. And it's this kind of like upside down pyramid where it's the job of management to support all the people above them as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to the other way around where, you know, management is sitting on top of all the minions.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of this idea of like, well, that's a very different way of thinking about management, but
Something to emulate.
something to emulate because
How do we serve?
how do you serve as a manager? How are you serving the people like that
Mm-hmm.
are working under you? But if you don't see it like that, I kind of thought that's such a different way of thinking about it. And if I'm a manager, I hope I'm there to act as a servant to those people that you're managing.
Mm-hmm. Let's, for the sake of time, we'll
Sure,
just go to the next
sure,
question.
sure.
We could ask, and I guess for people for career, that is a very good thing to look forward to. And then I guess if mostly it's students watching, maybe asking the family role models isn't so much, but
Yeah,
um, yeah, I mean that's a really good quality one of looking up to the people who are willing and ready and committed to serving the people that they represent.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think so. For me, it was just kind of such a different perspective. I always saw managers as somebody that you're trying to like impress and work towards.
Yeah.
And for them, it's, I don't know, I think a good manager has almost got the opposite. What
For
about you?
sure,
What do you
for
see in a
sure.
role model?
Oh no, this is why I asked the question.
I'm curious.
Well, for sure, how they deal with me. Hold on, let me actually pause and think. Well, someone I would like to be like. So, if I value the insight that they can provide me, so
Yes.
my friend that I live with, he's been a mentor to me. He's able to answer my questions, which Google isn't always able to do, right?
Yeah.
And bring together different things. For me, a lot of it is based off of logic, right? Like if their ideas alone just make sense
Yes.
and are practical and can be replicated, that's someone I like. I want to be like this person. This makes
That's
sense,
interesting. Yeah.
right? You know, I do like abstract ideas, but I also have this inverse pyramid of like, okay, well, what's practical, right? You're telling me this. You perched yourself on top of the mountain and you're preaching to me this abstract concept, but can you come down at the bottom of the mountain and show me
Right.
what the first step is?
Right. In a tangible sort of way.
Right.
Like, yeah.
And if you can't, then it's like, well, like that concept goes. If you can't explain things in a simple manner, then you don't really understand them.
Right.
Which as teachers is hard sometimes. It's can hit the ego
Absolutely.
for sure
Yes.
when you think about it. But for people who are able to provide that, I would add in something I try to emulate calm for sure. I get that from Jocko Willink. How do I calmly address my athletes? Just watching the soccer boys, a bunch of the
Yeah.
guys play basketball. How do you calmly address when they're doing something wrong?
Right.
How do I get, like, I look for people who try to open up my mind. And so I try to do the same thing. How do I get my athletes? One of the things we did at the practice that I thought of just randomly was, instead of in a timeout me talking or at halftime, and, during that period, I should get the players to talk. So I
Right.
asked them, what's one thing you did well? Okay, what's one thing you need to work on? And then they're actually thinking and aware.
Right.
Then now, for next season, if I'm recording the games, I can talk about that. Hey, were you boxing out? Were you in the place where you needed to be? Were you doing what you were supposed to be doing? How do I calmly address the problems? How do I be humble? Like, how do I recognize my own mistakes? We won't chat about this, but I made a big one that I had to like calmly think to myself, like, was I being a complete jackass? Was I being an idiot? Yes, I was. How should I properly address this situation next time?
Right.
Can I forgive myself for doing it poorly this time? Can I let go of that issue? And I look for people, I suppose, with that maturity of life to an extent.
Yeah.
It's hard to say because I don't have a lot of mentors that I meet in person, and we'll chat about that as well.
Sure.
And so, I don't really deal with a lot of my mentors in person, one on one, and see them working day to day.
Yeah.
And so that's hard because you don't always see them. But in those moments, like their voice echoes in my head.
Yeah.
Hey, what do you really want here? Like, do you want to
Yes.
fight or do you want to have peaceful resolution? Because maybe fighting is necessary. Like, maybe you
Yeah.
need to show your teeth and, like, show your claws and,
Yeah.
throw hands a little bit
Sure.
verbally or
Yes.
like metaphorically speaking. Like,
Yeah.
you need to, because in that situation, I had to express myself and hear the other side and be willing to have
Yes.
that openness. Like, okay, I screwed up for sure. Even with my athletes, hey, I really should have. I told them later on, like, I should have taught you guys how to play a zone defense a long time ago.
Right.
Because teaching it to you 5 minutes before a game and seeing how well you played, holy, we would have done so much better this season if we started practicing it as well.
Right.
I'm sorry. I don't know if I said I'm sorry specifically, but I did apologize. Okay, we should have done this. That was wrong.
But what else can you do
Right?
at that point?
And I guess I get that from Peterson. Like, you own up, you're
Right.
stupid. Like, of course I do stupid stuff. So I guess a lot of what I look for is the maturity. Because, one thing I was telling my friend, it's like, you got to be mindful of the games people are playing. Like, some people are playing a zero game where
Yes.
everyone loses. Some people are playing a manipulative game where I take everything. Some people are losing the game. It's like, well, I really don't know how to get my chips back, right? Every time I get
Right.
chips, they leave. How do you play a game where as many people as possible can win,
Yeah.
right? And how many different methods can you create for winning? So I guess to answer that question completely, I look for people who can teach me more than I already know.
Yeah,
You know, like
that's a good summary. I think
if
that's
if you can't do that, then we can be friends, we can be peers. But if you can do that, then I can look up to you as a mentor. You know,
right.
you can open my mind to certain things. You know, I love having conversations about raising kids with you, and
Yeah.
I try to send you some stuff here and there and ask you
Yeah, I love it.
questions, and it's like, oh, like you know, and I would actually one day like to have a chat with that topic about your perspective, and from there going like, you know, I learned this thing from David. Like, I should try this. Like, what is another thing that I've learned? How do these things interact? Right? How do people do that? And what can I learn? And so I guess that's for me. A lot of it is like if you can provide me some opportunity to learn,
Right.
I can see you as a mentor,
Yes.
and then eventually we get to like equals, and then maybe I carry on or whatever. So
Right.
that's how I would answer that
Yeah,
question.
I agree. I think that's
Uh,
those are great thoughts.
Let's go. How can you acquire a role model? So, considering both the role models we interact with physically and those we don't,
Yeah.
because many of our role models are authors that we
Sure.
aren't very, you know, I've never met any of these
Yes.
people really. So,
Absolutely.
for someone who's 15 to 25, you know, how can they acquire a role model
Yeah.
or anyone for that
Yeah.
matter?
Absolutely. I think it's so important. You know, I like I say, I kind of fell into a lot of my role models. I was very fortunate in that a lot of the people I really ended up looking up to at work sort of either assumed the role, you know, like they kind of almost got assigned or like sort of just fell into that role for me and just ended up kind of mentoring me, which was great because I didn't really have to go and seek them out. But looking back, I feel like there would have been value in that too.
What characteristics of yours do you think they saw that made them also want to do that? Because there's
That's a
something
good
in
question.
you, right?
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. I mean, I would say I was always pretty open. I mean, I was pretty eager and I was pretty open to taking feedback.
So you're
You know,
wanting
I
to
was
learn.
pretty willing. Yeah, like
Mhm.
I always tried to be, because you know they're better than you, right?
Mhm.
Like at what they're doing at the
Mhm.
work. Like you
Mhm.
can see they've been doing it for 20 years. Obviously, they've got a lot of experience and coming into like new careers. I knew that I didn't know what I was doing. And I was pretty young in a career where you're meeting with some pretty high level people. So I always tried to like put myself in a position where maybe you're a little out of your comfort zone, but there's people there to kind of help you too. And if you ask, I was always pretty good at, I guess, asking for help and feedback when I kind of needed it. And I don't know, those people were always I found people very willing to offer that help. So maybe I wasn't actually asking for mentorship, but I was asking for help. And I would ask
Guidance.
for
Okay.
guidance, you know, like I
Which
would
is
do as
essentially,
much,
which is
which
the
is,
essence of
which is
mentorship.
the
Yeah.
answer. Yeah, I suppose so. You know, like I would do as much as I could do, and then I would kind of say, hey, what do you think about this? Am I on the right track here? Or would you be doing something different? Or in this scenario, you know, I've kind of thought about it and I'm trying to manage between these different things and I'm not quite sure where to go. This is kind of what I'm thinking. What do you think?
Mm-hmm.
And you know, showing that I put in the thought and I'm trying to apply myself and
Mm-hmm.
then ask for guidance. And then those people, I guess, over time, just kind of those were the people that kind of became my mentors.
So let's say you go to your boss on a Monday with a problem and he gives you a solution. How soon after are you implementing that?
Yeah, almost immediately.
Okay. Which I guess that's low hanging fruit. It's
Yeah,
work, right? You got
yeah,
to if
for
you
sure.
ignore what the boss says, it's kind of like why'd you waste that
Yeah,
time? So let's say you have a dilemma in life.
sure,
How quickly
exactly.
after finding a solution do you implement it?
I'd say pretty much immediately.
Okay.
I think about it in terms of like parenting's a big one, and I know like a lot of students aren't really gonna relate to the parenting one, but whether it's a school problem, like whether it's a peer problem or a whatever, if you have somebody that you know, like, because parenting, I mean, that's just happens in my life right now. But
Mm-hmm.
that cousin that I look up to really close, that is kind of where I want to be. You know, they're challenging me, and they're kind of where
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to be. They do a lot of reading, they do a lot of work, and so when I ask them, you know, I come up with a problem when the kids are doing, like, I don't know how to handle this
Mm-hmm.
situation because a kid problem, like, you know, help trying to be a good parent. It's a relationship problem. It's no different than peers,
Student.
students dealing with peers, and it's a relationship problem.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do you deal with that? And so I go to her all the time and I ask, I've got this problem and I don't really know exactly what to do. Like, what would you do?
Your oldest kid is 5.
Yeah, 5.
Okay. How old is her oldest child?
10.
Oh,
You
okay.
go
So
5
there's
years ahead.
quite a bit of a gap
Yes. Yeah.
there. Particularly, if a kid's listening to this, they may not realize, but developmentally and
Yeah.
brain-wise,
Yes.
that's a
It's huge.
humongous difference.
Huge.
Like even like going from 10 to 13 is massive. Right?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. So
Okay.
yes, kind of like definitely a few years ahead. But I'll ask and then I'll take that and we'll start doing it right away. My wife and I'll
Okay.
kind of start.
And I will add, it's kind of fascinating to hear that, but from my own friend I've heard who's mentored me quite a bit, those do seem to be the two best traits for
Mhm.
finding and keeping a mentor of, are you even open to listening?
Right.
Because I've sat down with students, I started talking to them, they're like, no, like, let me tell you.
Right.
Right? It's like, okay,
Yeah.
all right, like you're not open and receptive. 2 or 3 of those conversations, like, okay, like, I have work I need to do.
Right.
I'm not interested in hearing your interpretation of the world, right?
Yeah.
Nor am I interested in wasting my breath. Okay. So let's say one is like the kid's open. Now I would assume you were pretty high up on intellect for the big 5.
Yeah.
Right? So for us, like we love talking about ideas.
Sure.
That's fun. But if it's something that I know and mastered and I'm pretty confident in,
Yeah.
and you're not receptive to what I'm saying,
Yes.
I don't want to say it like 7 times because I already know it works.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, so you're open. And I raise that concern because, if you're just repetitively coming back just to talk,
Yes.
well, I'm not interested in just talking. I want to
Yes.
see action. Like, are you doing something?
And honestly,
Right.
I was gonna say that was one of the things that for me, I think definitely for like a student to be, if you're seeking out and you're gonna take the time of anybody to mentor you, definitely. That has got to be one of the biggest things is
Take
being
action.
attentive, listening to what they're saying, doing a lot more listening than talking. And a good mentor, I think, like in a lot of cases, is going to get you talking because they'll ask probably a lot of good questions that'll get you to think. But then, yes,
That's
take the
something I'm
action on
working
it.
on more. Which is ask, like, we're flipping the question on the kid
Right.
or whoever it is. Right?
Yes.
Well, what do you think? Tell me your thoughts on that.
Right.
Like, let's organize your mind because that might not be a problem for me.
Right.
Or I might already have my own thoughts organized on that. And I don't need to imprint me onto you.
I know.
I need you to guide yourself, right?
It's something I got to work on too because I've always, yes.
Well, and it's tricky because, we think like, okay, this person asked me a question, I should give them an answer.
Right.
But, at the end of the day, it's like, how often do you want this person to come to you with their problems,
Exactly.
right? Like eventually it's like, oh, they're competent and they're capable.
Yes.
Yeah.
And one of the best teachers I ever had was a ethics professor, and they would ask questions. He would ask questions, like a question, like an ethical dilemma question, right? And then you answer kind of your take on it, and then he would just move on. And I was like, well, what's that about? Like, what's the answer?
Yeah.
And he would never come back. It was just left it.
But then if he raises that question to 5 people and you hear all 5 answers,
right?
Like, oh, I never thought about that.
And we'd have this discussion in the class, and we'd be talking about it, and we'd raise different sides, and it really got you thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And then he'd say, "Okay, moving on," and he'd move on to the next topic, and there was no resolution.
Mm-hmm.
But you were left thinking about it. You'd leave the classroom thinking about that.
Yeah.
And
which is good
what an
for-
interesting strategy. And as a talking about mentors and role models, yeah, definitely somebody that's like, wow, what a different way of, you don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to necessarily find somebody who has all the answers.
Gotta get him thinking.
Gotta get them thinking.
Yeah. Let's finish up quickly. So, who is someone right now that you look up to and try to be like?
Yeah.
You already mentioned, so your cousin.
Yeah, so definitely from a parenting standpoint, my cousin, I mentioned that, like my former caller manager who I've always looked up to. And like for me, I mean, parenting is such a big part of my life as a teacher.
Yeah.
Like I have, there are a couple teachers that have really influenced.
Like at the school.
Yeah.
Okay.
Here I have tons of people that I look up to in the school and teachers, even former teachers of mine.
Former teachers.
Okay. Who I think about all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So like I've got parent role models and teacher role models, but yeah, I've got teacher role models teachers even from my high school days that I still I'll be teaching and I'll think about like, oh, I wonder how they would have done this, because I can still remember the feelings they
Yeah.
left you with.
Mhm.
And so,
Mhm.
yeah, there are just so many people that I kind of feel like if I ask myself, I wonder what they would do in this situation, then to me, that's definitely somebody that I'm looking up to and somebody that, if I'm not asking them what they would do, maybe it's somebody I should be reconnecting with.
I guess I'll finish it with this thought from a game, actually, from God of War, which really emphasizes this father-son relationship and a lot of just familial relationships. And there's a very particular scene that I like where, the father and son make this agreement. It's like the kid tells his dad, it's like, hey dad, like when I'm not around, like when I'm off out in the world, like you don't have to be that other man you used to be before you had me, right? Which is the God of War, right? Like, he's this
Yes.
very violent guy. It's like, no, you don't mess with my family. And the kid promises to his father, it's like, okay, but when I'm away and you're not there, I promise to listen to your voice in my head because you train me well. And having
Right.
that mentality of like, what would my mentor do? Which really helped me out yesterday, right? Of like, well, what is the best advice I've heard for this dilemma? And what would that person say in the situation? What have they said about this?
Isn't that powerful if they're not even there?
Yeah, like then they really have an influence on you. And hopefully it's a good, positive role model and mentor.
Yeah.
Someone that's trying to help you live the life that you want, right? Which I would say, for myself, Jordan Peterson, for sure.
Yeah.
In many areas of life, it's like, yeah, we don't need to go
What?
into that, but
No, but it is true.
in so many areas of life, it's like, well, what outcome do I want?
Right.
And how do I get there? Is it by being a whiny little brat or by being a man, maturing, and admitting to my faults so that that podcast talks about play. Well, there's many types of play, and I think one of them is verbal. And in his book, in the second one, there's the rule, plan diligently to maintain the romance in your relationship. He talks about like you really need to sort out all these problems, these domestic problems of like, who's gonna set the table, who's gonna take out the garbage, who's gonna do all this stuff. But it comes back down to it's like, how do I ensure that that these people are willing to play the game continuously? So when your mentee comes to you and says, I know you told me to do this, but I did what I wanted to.
Right.
Do you just shit on them right there? Like you're an idiot. What were you thinking? I told you what to do. Or do you respond by saying, well, what did you learn?
Yeah.
And that comes back to what I was saying earlier. Like, how do I calmly address these problems? Because which might be funny for some of my students because I love being theatrical. I'm not calm in the classroom. I'm all over the place.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's not necessarily how I would describe myself either, but
But that's I think like an important distinguishment of my private life, my personal life. Like I'm not acting; it's me.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas in the classroom, sometimes like, okay, how do we make this interesting? How do we
Yeah.
make this fun? How do I be more dramatic here? Right. Like Robert Greene, I was just listening to him and talk about. It's almost like I put on this mask. I come to teach. It's like, oh, let's play. Let's have fun. Right. And because the material can get dry, can get boring.
Sure.
But yeah, listening to the voices of your mentors in your head to guide you through challenging problems because you can kind of come up with a solution. You listen to that little voice in your head and tells you it's like, you probably should like chat with your boss about this and tell him your mistake and like you should go talk to the contractors and say, hey, listen, like I really screwed this up and how can I make this right?
Right.
Go to your kids like you did something that bothered me and I responded poorly. And I'm trying to learn.
Exactly.
And it's I'm sorry at the end of the day. Which in the moment can be so hard, like your ego screaming,
Yeah.
hell no. Like you're the man.
Yeah.
Don't don't do that. But
what do you want your kids to really learn? You know what I mean? Like, is the point for them to feel just
well, and for me, I mean, I don't have kids, but the question of like, who do we want to be?
Right. And
Like, who
that's
do you
it.
want to be as David Murphy at every
Exactly.
stage of your life? Who do I want to be as Najib Khawaja? Who,
Yeah.
if you have a mentee, think, well, what kind of person do you want to be?
Yeah.
Right? And which voices, which spirit guides you to that?
Absolutely. And I think that would be one thing I would say to students or anybody who's looking for a mentor, and hopefully you're always looking for a mentor, is, like be mindful of who it is you're looking up to. Because just because it's somebody that you spend a lot of time with doesn't necessarily mean that that's somebody that
It's worth
is
looking up
worth
to.
looking up to. Do you know what I mean?
Because they have a lot of money,
Yeah,
or a very beautiful woman on their arm, or
right.
whatever it is, whatever flashy thing it is that attracts attention. Life is a long game.
I was gonna say, and maybe there's parts of that, maybe there's things they do that you want to look up to. That's great, but look at it all, and then
Yeah.
decide what parts of different people and what is it that you look up to in different people, and what do you want to try and emulate, and then be
And then get after
and
it.
then get after it.
Just
Go get
drop a
after it.
word
and
with
Make it
that.
you.
Get after it.
Yeah.
Get after it, kids. Thank you.
Yeah, you betcha.